how can I change this object? This object isn't serving me. By the way, this object is the only reason you're alive. Your body, like being able to be here, breathing and like sitting and feeling, like without the thing that we are hating so much, we're not here. We have got to just like lose some of this hatred and for our bodies because it's the only reason we're here. What is the story you are telling about your body that makes it so it can never be enough? Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist and the host of this podcast, which, by the way, is in the top 1% of podcasts. Don't forget, if you like this episode, click that subscribe button and please leave a rating. It helps me continue to do this work. All right, let's get to it. We tell so many stories about our bodies, and really, it's not all our fault. So I'm not going to give us a total pass because we do have to face some of these narratives and have the courage to change them. However, we were really born into a world that was already telling stories about bodies. We were tiny little babies and there were already stories about bodies going on around us. And so we grew up in this. This is the culture that we've grown up in, but that doesn't mean we have to take it. It doesn't mean we have to sit still. And it doesn't mean that we have to hate our bodies forever. So today in this episode, we're going to go through some stories we tell about our bodies, kind of dismantle that and move forward with tools that I think will help with the mindset and help us to love the body that we're in. That's the goal. And it's sad that we even have to have this conversation and we couldn't have just loved our body like we did when we were 2 years old. My daughter, who is 7 years old, recently said to me, "I'm so lucky that I get to look just like you." And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, whoo, to be able to be a 7-year-old and just love the way you look so much so that when you see your mom, who, by the way, is aging and has a whole bunch of baggage around weight and all of the things that you think, I'm so lucky I get to look like her. That's pretty magical, isn't it? So we are going to try to dismantle some of this stuff so that we can feel better about ourselves and feel that joy around our bodies and what our bodies can do. The first story we tell ourselves is, I should look like XYZ, right? There's some kind of body ideal that we should look like, that we're saving those genes for, and we are under the impression we should look some certain kind of way. There's something called the self-discrepancy theory, and this is basically used to describe what that discrepancy between what we see in the media, what we see in movies and magazines, and then what we see when we look in the mirror. And basically that the difference between what we see in media and what we see in the mirror is how we feel about ourselves. That discrepancy will have an impact on how we feel about ourselves. And this is not even talking about, weight loss magazines that we saw as little kids, or, whatever time you saw those magazines that are like, this is how to lose 20 pounds. It's not even talking about that. It's just talking about what happens when we don't see ourselves or our body type in media. And immediately we already feel like we're not enough. We already feel a certain level of body dissatisfaction because we don't look like what we're seeing in media. And so, of course, if you are like me and you're an elder millennial, you grew up in the 90s, or maybe you're Gen X, you exclusively only saw stick thin figures and thought, well, that's exactly how I'm supposed to look. And what's interesting about this is, as that was happening, and as I've kind of looked back at my life, not only is that what we were seeing and what we were internalizing, what we were supposed to look like, so were, our boyfriends, so were our friends. And I had a lot of boyfriends and friends who felt like they could talk about my body as if it weren't enough, just because it wasn't the body they were seeing in the media. And so they were, feeling emboldened enough to say, hey, I'm going to check your lunch every day to figure out why it is you don't look like the girl on TV, to make sure that you're eating healthy. I'm like, okay, here you go. That's a true story. So first of all, we need to recognize that there was that discrepancy for a long time while our prefrontal cortexes were developing. We didn't even have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and we are being told, by the way, this is what your body should look like. So I then grew up into an adult as I'm kind of facing all of this and having a lot of body dissatisfaction, undiagnosed eating disorders, etc. And I then go on to be in media myself. And the pressure of being on TV is a different kind of pressure, especially, in the generation that I was in. And I do think that things are changing, which is an amazing thing. But I was recently interviewed by a high school student who was working on research about our body dissatisfaction and how it correlates with media and what we see. She asked me the question, if you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself about your body, to maybe take off some of that pressure? And if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know that when I had my second baby, I lost like 50 pounds, literally all my baby weight during my maternity leave, which I think was about 4.5 months here in Oregon. And so when I returned to work, I was pre-baby weight. And I didn't do that for funsies. And that was not easy. And it actually kind of reminds me of Beyonce. Beyonce had a documentary behind the scenes and she just was like eating an apple. And I remember someone's comment was like, so you're telling us that we just have to eat an apple to lose all the weight? But like literally it was so restrictive. And I was eating enough that I could breastfeed my baby and he was being able to be breastfed, but I was kicking my little booty with insanity. I was working probably harder than you should have been at that postpartum time because there was a lot of pressure going back onto television after having a baby. And so this high school student asked me, would you have changed that? And that pressure was not only after having a baby, that pressure was all the time. And anybody on media is going to be able to sit here and say, oh yeah, that's totally true. So I said, oh my gosh, I could not go back and say, hey, your body weight's okay. Don't change your body weight, because would I have gotten the job? I don't know. And so there is a lot around our culture and what was accepted as an okay body for so long. And while I do think that's changing, we just saw Victoria's Secret have a runway show that had plus size models, although maybe they weren't plus size enough. I don't. There's a lot of talk around that, but we are at least seeing different types of bodies. We see the Dove campaign. They've got all different kinds of bodies. We are seeing different bodies represented in like Gap commercials, which is very exciting. However, our brains have still internalized decades of stuff that said only one body type was okay, right? So we do have to do a little bit of work internally. Just one more issue that I see with the body positivity movement has been, we saw stick thin as the only acceptable body for so long. So we, as we do as humans, swung the pendulum over to say like skinny is not okay or thin is not okay. And we only accept bodies that are bigger. But then if you look on social media, you see comments that are like, you're too skinny, you need to eat, and it's all negative around that side. So if you're on that side, I see you and I feel for you, because I don't think that's easy either. And I think that the bottom line needs to be, there is no should about how your body should look. Our bodies are so unique. There is no standard. And that is what is the cool thing. That's what's the beautiful thing. And as we try to chase different body types or try to look a different way, we are leaving our own body behind, and we are not giving our own body the love and the appreciation that frankly it deserves. Our bodies do so much for us. So one of the top things that we can do about this is a social media audit. We have seen so much research that shows what you are seeing affects how you feel about your body. But if they make you feel a certain kind of way, you can unfollow. And if you're noticing that you're not having an issue, that's fine. But if you're having an issue, just click unfollow. And then there are so many really, really cool influencers today who are like, look, like this is what a belly looks like. I've had 2 kids. Here's what I look like. Here's cellulite. I'm a model and this is what my model photo looks like, but this is what it looks like when I sit down. I love that kind of stuff because it shows like our bodies are real. Our bodies move and have stretch marks and have cellulite and jiggle, and all of those things are okay. So the very first thing is let's go, let's do a social media audit. Let's look through our feeds and make sure that we are following people who make us feel good about ourselves and are not increasing that discrepancy between what we see in the media and what we see on the mirror. And it's kind of a cool thing that we are in charge of that to some extent in 2025. We didn't have a role in that in the 90s. We only saw what we were given. But now that we have social media, we can curate our algorithms. And I hope that feels a little empowering. But I think that's the first step to feeling like our body should look any kind of way, right? Is to be able to see people who look like us and to celebrate people who look like us and to see them, wearing a bikini and not having abs. Those kind of very small things really do make a difference on our mindset. The next story I kind of want to dismantle is the story that weight loss is the best thing that can happen to you. I recently watched the Netflix documentary about The Biggest Loser. They had someone on there talking about how um, the greatest thing that can happen to a person that can be, you will never be celebrated more so about anything as you will be for weight loss. Something along those lines is what she said. And that's been my experience. When I think about things people have celebrated me for, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's having babies and losing weight. I think about when you're a kid, you're growing up, and every single time you go see extended family, they're like, oh my gosh, you're so big. And it's such a good thing for so long. You're 5 years old and you're so big because last time they saw you, you were two. And then you're 10 and you're so big. You're growing. Wow. And then suddenly you're 14 and they're like, oh my gosh, have you lost weight? And you're like, wait, I thought I was supposed to be growing, and that's what we celebrated. But now I've just learned that I need to shrink. And every single visit after mid teens, the question is, have you lost weight? Have you lost weight? My defense mechanism was, no, you just remember me fatter. That's any of my extended family will know that's literally what I've said to them because I don't know how to handle that conversation and why it is that my weight loss is being celebrated, even if there was weight loss, which oftentimes I was basically, the same within the same 5 pound range. And so right away as a teenager, I'm learning, oh my gosh, okay, shrink, shrink, shrink. Being small is the most important thing. Losing weight is the most important thing. And, I don't begrudge anyone, any of those extended family members, because guess where they learned it? They learned it from their parents. Guess where their parents learned it from their parents. And guess where their mom learned it from the media as well. That mom's like learning she needs to smoke to lose weight, or she needs to drink like a piece of cheese and a glass of wine, or whatever the diet was. The other thing is, I also remember when I was a teenager, I got a Body for Life book. And if you ever had these books, it was like full of exercises and meaningful information, that can make you get stronger and support your body health overall. But on the front, the full front spread and the full back spread, it was just so many before and after pictures. And so you would look at these before and after pictures and you would see people in the before picture with, like they looked sad. Their faces looked down. They're like, just every story they could tell about themselves, like, how did I let myself get this way? And I'm a loser and I'm lazy and I'm a slob, and all the stories you tell about yourself when you've gained a little bit of weight, you could see it on their face, right? And so it was the before picture of like, I'm a piece of crap was the expression they were putting on their face. And the after picture, which was like, they were toned, they had abs, they had muscles, and they were strong, and they were like very happy. And the story and I remember just like staring at all these pictures, like, these people could make this happen. I can make it happen. I can make it happen. I can make it happen. And I remember staring at these photos, but I think not only like what I was consciously thinking, the subconscious story was, when you're a before picture, you are not enough. So what is the best thing that can happen to you? Weight loss. Weight loss is the best thing that can happen to you. And when we only focus on weight loss and when we only focus on our weight, what actually happens is we see ourselves as an object rather than a living, breathing, beautiful entity that is able to accomplish and do things and live things. And, I said accomplish, but I don't even want to focus on the accomplishment. I mean, honestly, just being able to be present in a world and experience things, that's enough for us and for our bodies. But when we look at only weight, and actually there was research on this that showed that when we are only, I think it was tied to social media. The more time we spent on social media, the more so it was that we were going to objectify our bodies as if they were an object rather than, something to like love and adore and appreciate. It was something to see as an object. Like, how can I change this object? This object isn't serving me. By the way, this object is the only reason you're alive. Your body, like being able to be here, breathing and like sitting and feeling, like without the thing that we are hating so much, we're not here. We have got to just like lose some of this hatred and for our bodies because it's the only reason we're here. What I have found with weight loss, and I think about all the times that I've lost the same 20 and 50 pounds, whether that was with a baby or without a baby, um, what I have learned is if your body is not enough for you today, it is never going to be enough. We have to make the decision that we love our body today. And you know what? If you have to start with the only reason you exist on this earth is because you have the body, that's enough. That's enough of a reason to love it. Whatever last thing, think if you could of the last amazing thing that happened in your life. You know why you got to do that? Because you're alive here in a body. That's the bottom line. And I think that we need to find that appreciation for our bodies and start loving them where they are today, or it will never be enough. I have gained and lost weight so many times throughout my life, and it's been a large amount of weight. Sometimes I've been 50 pounds heavier and I've been 50 pounds lighter. And I think that the thing about weight loss is if you do not love yourself at the highest, if you don't love the way your body looks at the highest weight, guess what? You're not going to love the way that it looks at the lowest weight. And I mean, I guess you don't exactly have to love the way it looks, but you have to love it because it will never be enough for you if you don't love it today. And I think about, like recently I've lost weight and I still have, stretch marks and cellulite and like kind of like a baggy stomach. I have larger thighs, always have, always will. Like, if you can't love your body for what it is, you will never love it. And losing weight doesn't change that. There is things that losing weight will give you, but it's not you know, I guess I don't want to put a blanket on. It's not the best thing that will ever happen to you because I know that there have been tons of people who will tell stories of losing weight and being able to accomplish things that they couldn't before, go on rides that they couldn't before, have health screenings come back in a much better way. But when people are just tripping over themselves to congratulate me for like a weight loss, I'm like, there's other things you can congratulate me for too. You know, I've been working really hard at this, or I've been, I put a podcast episode up. Like, you can congratulate me about other things, and weight loss doesn't have to be the biggest success I have in my life, because there's just a lot more things to look at and to focus on and to be excited about. And so, what is your actionable advice here? Is don't treat yourself like a before picture. Don't look at yourself in the mirror like you're a before picture. Don't ruminate on every part of your body that you hate. Ruminate on the parts of your body that you love. Ruminate on the one small thing. I actually think about when I was going through middle school and, I hated my body. I hated the way I looked. I wasn't perfect. Nobody is, but like, I definitely wasn't, Britney Spears. And I was like, I hated everything about myself. And I remember one time we had this assignment to write one thing we loved about ourselves. I'm sitting there. It's my sixth grade class. Actually, it was sixth grade. And this is when all my friends had turned on me. It was a very hard time in my life. And I'm like, oh, one thing I love about myself. Nothing. I love nothing. And finally, I decided, you know what I love about myself is my eyes. I just wrote my eyes. And the nice thing about writing my eyes was, it was like not something that someone could look at me and decide, oh, there's something wrong with your eyes. I mean, they always could. They could do whatever they want. But it was nice because I just was able to focus on one tiny thing. And if that's where you are, where you need to focus on one tiny thing, I don't know. Is it your manicure? Like, it doesn't need to be your thighs today. If you don't love your thighs and have historically not loved your thighs, you don't have to be like, okay, now I leave this podcast and I love my thighs now, because that's not really how our brains work. But what if you start with something tiny, something so small? What if it's not that you love your thighs, but you do love that you can walk? You do love that you have the ability to walk for yourself. I mean, that's pretty awesome. So we'll start there. You are not a before photo. And then when you look at your mirror, look at yourself in the mirror, don't have that expression of that before photo. Smile at yourself. You deserve the smile. You deserve to say, hey, that's me. And, if it immediately it's not, I love me, what if it's like, I care for myself. Like, I get to be me. And you slowly kind of work toward, I love me. I think that has to be the first step to any kind of anything. If you want a weight loss journey, if you want to lose weight, that's great for you. You get to decide that. I don't get to decide that for you. And certainly don't get to say you need to do that. But what if you just start there? Step number one, like, let's smile at ourselves in the mirror. Let's have that after photo expression when we look at ourselves and love ourselves regardless of anything else. Finally, we need to stop telling stories about other people's bodies, because the more stories we tell about other people's bodies, the more it reinforces those ideals and those stories in our own heads. And so some of the very popular ones that I'll hear are like, oh, he let himself go. Oh, she let herself go. Oh, you're losing weight for the right reason. Oh, you're losing weight the right way. What? What are these stories even? First of all, when you look at somebody's body, you do not know anything more than what their body looks like. You don't know if they're dealing with some kind of chronic disorder that is affecting the way that their body metabolizes food or calories. You don't know if they're going through depression. And what's interesting is oftentimes we'll just jump to depression, like, oh, they're overweight, they're depressed. No, that's you. Perhaps, but you don't know unless you know. What I really don't like about telling stories about other people's bodies is we just have no idea. We have no idea. And I was recently talking to one of my friends about this, and I think where a lot of my thoughts about talking about women's bodies came right after my miscarriage. I had lost a good amount of weight before my miscarriage, and then I got pregnant, and the only thing, that helps me feel okay during pregnancy is carbs. And I gained, I don't know, 15, 20 pounds in a short amount of time. And I just felt like the weight of the judgment, and nobody like knew what was going on in my life. And it was really challenging. I think that's challenging for me. And I think that's when I said, oh my gosh, can we just like not talk about people's bodies? Please, for the love. And during that time, I also had people ask if I was pregnant. And I'm like, well, no, I'm just carrying a baby that I've just learned has no heartbeat. So I think it's just so important that we just stop with the storytelling about people's bodies. We don't know what's going on with them. And we honestly don't have any like ownership or responsibility to like try to determine something about someone because of their body size or body shape. And really the way to stop the storytelling is just to stop it in its tracks. So when you find yourself saying, oh, she really let herself go, like just back yourself off of that train of thought and say, actually, I'm not going to tell a story about what's going on with her body. I have no idea. Or at least well, you lost weight the wrong way. And you're talking about Ozempic or GLP-1s. And you can say, well, actually, I have no idea what the right or wrong way is, because who decides that? And speaking of Ozempic and GLP-1, that is what our next conversation is going to kind of revolve around. One of my favorite influencers and online friends, Andy Neal, is coming on the podcast to talk about his experience of being in the body positive space online and then making a decision to get on GLP-1s, and what he has done in the face of so much judgment, with so many people talking at him with their opinions, what he should and shouldn't have done, and how he's been able to move through all of that. So that conversation is coming up on Thursday. Do not forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you for being here on Happiness and Progress.